The Bren Gun's weight across Jake McNiece's shoulders feels heavier in the pre-dawn silence of Normandy's hedgerow country. 3 days since the mist drop scattered the filthy 13 across flooded fields and narrow causeways, and the steel bridge at Pont-du-Phars still stands like a monument to everything gone wrong. Through gaps in the morning fog, German voices echo from positions they weren't supposed to hold. McNiece adjusts his grip on the weapon, feeling the familiar bite of straps against his shoulders. The bridge looms 50 yards ahead, stone approaches leading to steel girders that hum with the distant rumble of approaching armor. Somewhere in the tree line, Corporal Bielski lies bleeding in a ditch, depending on McNiece to hold this position long enough for the others to maneuver. "How many you figure?" whispers Smoky Gordon from the embankment behind him. "Enough to matter," McNiece replies, not taking his eyes off the bridge approach. The steel spine of the structure catches what little light filters through the fog, each beam and rivet visible in the grey dawn. This was supposed to be blown 3 days ago, turned into twisted metal and broken stone, before German armor could cross and flank the beachhead. Instead, it stands intact, waiting. The mission brief had been simple on paper. Drop a half-mile north of Pont-du-Phars, rig the bridge supports with TNT, withdraw before dawn. The reality sprawled across 3 square miles of bocage maze. Scattered paratroopers, lost equipment, German patrols hunting them since midnight. McNiece had found Bielski bleeding, dragged him 2 miles through brambles, and set up this firing position with nothing but the Bren gun and the grim certainty that retreat meant abandoning the wounded. Lieutenant Morrison crouches beside a mud-stained map, radio crackling with static. Baker Company's pinned down 2 clicks south. No word from the bridge demo team. McNiece knows what Morrison won't say. The bridge demo team is probably dead or scattered, their explosives lost in the marsh or misdropped with half the other gear. The steel bridge waits, patient and solid, while German reinforcements move closer with each passing hour. A rifle crack echoes from the stone parapet, followed by the distinctive whine of a ricochet, German sniper testing their positions. McNiece shifts the Bren gun's bipod, searching for muzzle flash. There, a flicker from the northwest corner of the bridge. He fires a controlled burst, watching stone chips fly. The sniper's rifle falls silent. The weapon feels different in his hands now, not just 23 pounds of steel and wood, but the accumulated weight of every man who's ever crouched behind its muzzle flash. In North Africa, it had been Kowalski bleeding out, while McNiece held off Italian infantry. In Sicily, Liebgott with shrapnel in his leg, counting on McNiece to keep firing while he crawled to cover. From his position in the embankment, McNiece can see the entire tactical picture Morrison's map can't show. The narrow causeway leading to the bridge, the flooded fields on either side, that channel movement, the steel girders that would funnel German armor straight toward the beachhead if left intact. Every burst he fires tells his scattered squad where he is, gives them direction in the chaos. But the bridge stands, and time runs shorter with each distant rumble of approaching tanks. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. The German MG-42 opens up from the tree line with its distinctive buzzsaw chatter drowning out everything else. McNiece presses himself into the mud as bullets tear the air above him, the Bren gun's steady fire rate suddenly seeming inadequate against the enemy's mechanical fury. But he's learned something in 2 years of combat that no manual teaches. Firepower means nothing without position and timing. The German crew fires blind into the fog, hoping to suppress while their infantry advances. McNiece counts seconds, letting them believe they've pinned him. When the MG-42 pauses to reload, he rises and puts 20 rounds into the muzzle flash, then immediately shifts position, dragging the Bren gun 3 feet left. "They're crossing the bridge," Gordon calls from behind him. McNiece glimpses field grey uniforms moving across the steel span, using the girders for cover. Not armor yet, but infantry with Panzerfausts and the confidence of men who know reinforcements are coming. Lieutenant Morrison slides into the mud beside him, map forgotten. Artillery says 15 minutes for fire support. Can you hold? McNiece doesn't answer directly. 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours, with German infantry already across, and more coming. The steel bridge hums under their boots, each footstep a reminder of what the misdrop cost them. If the filthy 13 had landed on target, this bridge would be rubble by now. The sound carries him back to another bridge, another dawn. Sicily, July 1943, when he'd watched Italian engineers trying to repair a span his charges had damaged but not destroyed. The same helpless feeling of a job half finished, of watching the enemy use what should have been denied to them. McNasty, you still with us? Morrison's voice cuts through the memory. Still here, Lieutenant. McNiece adjusts his grip on the Bren Gun, feeling the barrel's heat through his gloves. Still here, but for how much longer? From across the field, the distinctive chatter of Gordon's Thompson echoes off the stone walls of a bombed farmhouse. Then Plowdo's rifle, single shots from a different angle. The squad is moving, using his fire as a rally point. McNiece feeds a fresh magazine into the Bren Gun, feeling the satisfying click of the mechanism. 47 rounds between 3 magazines. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but enough to hold until the others can maneuver. A new sound cuts through the morning air. The deeper rumble of tank engines, still distant but growing closer. McNiece knows that sound. Panzer IVs, maybe Panthers, following the roads toward Pont du Phars. Once they cross that steel bridge, the narrow causeways will become killing fields for any Allied unit trying to advance inland from the beachhead. Bielski stirs behind him, trying to sit up despite the field dressing around his shoulder. How bad is it, Sergeant? Bad enough, McNiece replies, not taking his eyes off the bridge approach. Through the thinning fog, he can see more German infantry forming up on the far side. They're not rushing now, just methodically preparing for the next push. Professional soldiers who know time favors them. The Bren Gun becomes his anchor in the chaos, the fixed position that lets the scattered squad maintain contact and coordinate movement. Every burst tells them where he is, but it also tells the Germans exactly where to concentrate their fire. McNiece watches the steel girders catch the strengthening light, each beam a reminder of the mission that should have been completed days ago. The radio crackles with fragments of reports from across the Normandy sector. Baker Company still pinned down, Charlie Company advancing slowly through Bocage, south of Carrington. Scattered references to bridges blown and bridges lost. Morrison listens with the hollow expression of an officer watching his tactical picture disintegrate in real time. McNiece keeps the Bren Gun trained on the bridge approach, but his attention splits between immediate threats and the larger implications. Every hour the steel span at Pont du Phars remains intact. German armor has another route to threaten the beachhead. Every hour his squad stays pinned in these positions, other missions go unsupported. 3rd Battalion took their objective, Morrison reports, folding the radio back into its case. But they're asking for demo support to finish the job. The irony bites deep. McNiece and the filthy 13 scattered across the countryside, unable to complete their primary mission, while other units need exactly what they're trained to provide. The steel bridge stands as monument to everything the airborne assault was supposed to prevent. Gordon slides through the mud from his position near the bombed farmhouse. His Thompson hangs loose in his hands, muzzle still warm from the latest exchange of fire. Plowdo says he can see tank tracks on the far approach, fresh ones. McNiece nods, unsurprised. The Germans aren't just holding the bridge, they're preparing to use it. Soon those steel girders will carry the full weight of panzer columns, turning Pont du Phars into a highway for counterattack. The memory surfaces unbidden, training at Fort Benning, demolitions instructor explaining how much TNT it takes to drop a steel span. Calculate the load-bearing points, place your charges accordingly, and remember, you rarely get a second chance if the first attempt fails. McNiece had memorized those calculations, practiced the techniques, but no instructor had explained what to do when the explosives are scattered across flooded fields and the enemy controls both approaches. A sniper's bullet cracks past his ear, close enough to feel the wind. McNiece swings the Bren gun toward the muzzle flash and fires a burst into the bridge parapet. Stone chips fly, but he knows he's not solving the fundamental problem. The bridge stands, the Germans hold it, and time works against every Allied unit trying to advance inland. Bielski manages to prop himself against the embankment, field dressing dark with seepage, but his eyes clear. What about the demo charges? Any chance some of the gear made it down intact? Even if it did, McNiece replies, we'd need to get close enough to place them. And that bridge is locked down tight. But even as he speaks, McNiece finds himself studying the steel structure with a demolitions NCO's eye. The main supports, the secondary beams, the points where properly placed charges could turn solid engineering into twisted wreckage. The calculations remain sharp in his memory, even if the means to implement them seem impossible. Morrison rejoins them, map case slung across his shoulder. Artillery's been delayed. Something about German counter-battery fire on the gun positions. McNiece keeps his eyes on the bridge, watching German infantry move with the confidence of men who know their positions are secure. Somewhere beyond the tree line, tank engines grow steadily louder. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The tank engines reach crescendo just as Morrison receives new orders crackling through the radio static. McNiece watches the lieutenant's face tighten as he copies down map coordinates and timelines that seem to assume the bridge at Pont du Phars will somehow disappear. Division wants us to withdraw to secondary positions, Morrison announces, folding the message carefully. Let artillery handle the bridge when they get sorted out. McNiece doesn't respond immediately. He's watching the steel girders catch the strengthening morning light, calculating angles and loads, the way his demolitions training drilled into him. Artillery might damage the bridge, but steel spans require precise placement of charges to guarantee destruction. Random shells, even direct hits, might only twist the metal enough to delay traffic for hours rather than days. The first Panzer IV emerges from the tree line, its long gun traversing slowly as the crew scans for targets. McNiece counts the seconds as it approaches the bridge approach, knowing that once German armor begins crossing in force, the Allied beachhead faces a level of pressure it might not withstand. "Sergeant!" Gordon calls from his position. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" McNiece nods grimly. The German infantry on the bridge has pulled back, clearing the span for armored movement. Standard procedure before tanks cross, but it also means a narrow window where the bridge holds fewer defenders. That's when McNiece notices the misdropped supply crate half submerged in the flooded ditch 30 yards to his right. Canvas and wood, stenciled markings barely visible through mud and water, but the size and shape suggest demolition supplies. The same crates he'd watched tumble from C-47s 3 nights ago, scattered by wind and defensive fire across the Normandy countryside. "Lieutenant," McNiece says quietly, "I need to check something." Morrison follows his gaze to the supply crate. "That's been there since we took position. Could be anything, rations, ammunition, medical supplies. But McNiece is already moving, keeping low as he works his way through the marsh grass toward the half-submerged crate. Behind him, the Bren gun lies silent, Gordon shifting position to cover his movement. The steel bridge waits, patient and solid, while German tank engines idle on the far approach. The crate's lid comes off with effort, revealing contents protected by oiled canvas and sealed containers, TNT blocks, detonation cord, blasting caps in their protective cases. Enough explosive to handle the bridge demolition they should have completed 3 days ago. McNiece allows himself one moment of bitter satisfaction before the tactical implications hit him. The bridge stands 50 yards away, defended by German infantry and covered by that MG-42 in the tree line. Even with explosives, approaching the structure means crossing open ground under fire, placing charges on steel girders while enemy soldiers shoot down from above. It's the kind of mission that looks impossible on paper and feels worse on the ground. McNiece hefts a block of TNT, feeling its familiar weight and density. The calculations run automatically through his mind, load-bearing points, placement angles, timer settings that will give him enough margin to reach cover. The steel bridge becomes an engineering problem rather than a tactical nightmare, at least for the few seconds before reality reasserts itself. "What have you got?" Morrison has worked his way through the marsh to join him. "Enough to do the job right," McNiece replies. "If we can get close enough to place them." The Panzer IV's engine note changes, picking up speed as it approaches the bridge. Soon that steel span will carry its first load of German armor, and every minute after that brings more tanks, more pressure on the beachhead, more Allied casualties in fighting that should never have been necessary. Years later, when military historians compile their neat accounts of the Pont du Phars bridge action, they'll write about improvised demolition under fire and initiative by non-commissioned officers in fluid tactical situations. What they won't capture is the way McNiece's hands shook as he rigged the charges, or the sound Bielski made when German bullets found him again during the approach. The truth starts with Morrison's reluctant nod and ends with 30 seconds that stretched like hours. McNiece worked his way along the flooded ditch toward the bridge, TNT blocks and detonation cord secured against his chest, while Gordon and Plowdow laid down covering fire from positions they'd hastily shifted to flanking angles. The steel girders rose above him like the ribs of some industrial cathedral, each beam precisely placed by engineers who never imagined paratroopers would crawl through marsh water to undo their work. McNiece found the load-bearing points by touch, muscle memory from countless training exercises guiding his hands as bullets sparked off metal above his head. But what the after-action reports won't mention is the moment when the detonation cord came up 6 feet short. McNiece had calculated for standard placement, not for the twisted approach forced by German fire. The charges were positioned correctly, the timers set, but the cord wouldn't reach back to safe distance for ignition. That's when Bielski dragged himself through the marsh grass, field dressing completely soaked with blood and ditch water, carrying the extra length of day cord from his own pack. "Figured you might need this," he gasped, pressing the coil into McNiece's hands. McNiece had 30 seconds to splice the connections before the German infantry spotted them. 30 seconds, while tank engines idled 50 yards away and MG-42 fire chewed through the embankment where Morrison and the others waited. His fingers worked automatically, twisting wire and checking connections while his mind catalogued everything that could go wrong. Faulty caps, wet fuses, timers that might fail or fire early. The splice held, the timer engaged, and then came the longest 15 seconds of McNiece's life, crawling through mud and marsh water while German voices shouted from the bridge approach. Bielski couldn't move fast enough on his own, so McNiece dragged him, counting heartbeats and wondering if they'd calculated the blast radius correctly. The explosion, when it came, wasn't the clean engineering solution McNiece had planned. The charges did their work, but debris rained down over a wider area than expected. A chunk of twisted girder landed 5 feet from where they'd taken cover, heavy enough to kill if it had hit. The German tank, caught halfway across the span when the bridge collapsed, plunged into the river with a sound McNiece still hears on quiet nights. But what haunts him more than the mechanical roar of destruction is Bielski's whispered words, just before the charges blew. "Hope this was worth it, Sergeant. Hope somebody remembers what it cost." The panzer crew didn't all die in the fall. McNiece could hear them calling for help from the wreckage, voices that sounded terrifyingly young. Morrison had to physically restrain him from attempting a rescue that would have exposed them all to German fire from the far bank. Those voices stayed with McNiece through the remainder of the Normandy campaign, through Holland and the Bulge, through the war's end and the long journey home to Oklahoma. The bridge had been destroyed, the mission completed, but the cost kept accumulating in ways no citation could capture. 43 years later, Jake McNiece sits in his living room in Oklahoma, watching freight trains cross the steel bridge outside Ponca City. The sound of wheels on rails brings back that morning at Pont du Phars, not the explosion or the tactical success, but Bielski's quiet breathing in the ditch afterward and the German voices calling from the wreckage below. The official citation mentions decisive action and initiative under fire. Nay, it doesn't mention the way Morrison's hands shook when he wrote the after-action report, or how Gordon stopped making jokes about the Filthy 13's reputation after watching McNiece splice detonation cord with bullets cracking overhead. It certainly doesn't mention the nightmares that followed McNiece home, or the way he still checks bridge construction whenever he drives over water. A military historian visited last month, recording interviews for a book about airborne operations in Normandy. Professional questions about tactics and equipment, about the challenges of misdropped units and improvised missions. McNiece answered them honestly, but he didn't mention how Bielski died 2 weeks later during the fighting near Saint-Vit, or how the extra length of detonation cord stayed coiled in McNiece's pack for the rest of the war, unused but never discarded. "Tell me about the bridge demolition," the historian had asked. "How did you manage the approach under fire?" McNiece had described the tactical situation, the supply crate discovery, the covering fire provided by Gordon and Plowdow. Clean, professional details that fit neatly into historical narrative. He hadn't mentioned the splice that almost failed, or the sound of German tank crew voices from the river below, or the way Bielski's blood had mixed with marsh water in the bottom of the ditch. The freight train passes, heading east toward distant cities McNiece will never visit. Its rhythm matches his heartbeat, steady and persistent, carrying loads from places he's forgotten toward destinations that no longer matter. But the sound lingers, metal on metal, precise and industrial and somehow alive. His granddaughter calls from the kitchen, asking about dinner plans and weekend visits. Normal life, domestic routines, the careful architecture of peace built on foundations most people never see. McNiece rises from his chair, leaving the window and its view of the bridge, but the sound follows him. Steel wheels on steel rails, loads carried and destinations reached, the patient work of infrastructure that connects one place to another. In his kitchen drawer, wrapped in oiled cloth, lies a coil of detonation cord from Normandy. Not the same one Bielski carried, but from the same supply crate, the same misdropped load that made the bridge demolition possible. McNiece hasn't touched it in 20 years, but he knows it's there, a tangible connection to that morning when 30 seconds of splicing cord under fire changed the course of a battle and the weight of memory he'd carry for the rest of his life. The bridge at Pont du Phars was rebuilt after the war, stronger and wider than the original span. French engineers used modern steel and updated designs, creating infrastructure that would last generations. But McNiece knows that beneath its clean lines and professional construction lie the twisted remains of the span he destroyed, and somewhere in the river silt rest pieces of a German tank with 3 young crew members who never made it home. That weight doesn't diminish with time or distance. It simply becomes part of the architecture of memory, as persistent and necessary as the steel bridges that carry freight trains across the American heartland, connecting what was to what is, bearing loads that never get lighter but somehow become bearable through the simple act of carrying them forward, one day at a time. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.